Okay, so somebody said this the other day, and it's been sitting with me for a while. They said vibe coding is the new blogging. And I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks, and it's just really resonated with me. And I see so many parallels. I just wanted to talk through this for a second and see if this makes any sense to you too. But first of all, think about like in the early days of the blogosphere, social media, like none of this stuff that we see now, independent media, like it didn't exist, right? The media was what they call establishment slash corporate slash, it was like the big boys playing the game. And maybe on the edges, you had some small media production, some small studio stuff, but you didn't really have just the average person being able to type up an article, make a video, put something out, and that set the tone for the national conversation or the global conversation, or that you would see a president doing big media interviews on like podcast or with small independent journalists. That was all like big corporate stuff. And so if you look at like the software world right now, what you essentially see is that most software comes from like these big hubs that come out of places like Silicon Valley and New York and London and blah, 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 wherever like tech hubs are. Just like media used to come out of like big cities and big hubs. But then the internet came out and websites started proliferating and people started putting their own content together, and it became easier to build websites, to put your ideas out there, to have an interesting take on the world. And then all these people who were maybe great writers or authors or just had interesting perspectives were able to take those and shape those and turn them into blogs. And for the first era of that, like if you remember in the early 2010, 12, 13, 14, in the early blogger days, maybe even before that, it was all dismissed, right? This is just, nobody takes you serious. They don't have any budget. They don't do any fact checking. They're just whatever, right? Like it was very much dismissed, just like a lot of people are dismissing vibe coders now, right? It's not scalable. The security's not right. Like nobody's paying attention. It's a small market, blah, blah, whatever. When you're dismissed as, what did I wrote here? Dismissed as unserious and not professional. It won't scale, is in quotes. And they said the same thing about bloggers. But again, look now, right? Look at how much of our conversation is, and you don't call them bloggers anymore. You just call them journalists. You call them media. You call them independent journalists. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in the vibe code space as people just start building and tinkering and moving a lot faster than like large enterprises can. The other thing that you're going to get is you're going to get problem solving a lot closer to the root of the issue. Like I said before, most software comes from big tech hubs, which means it comes from like small geographic areas where you have ideological beliefs that are very similar in a lot of ways, and they're maybe not reflective of what you might see in the real world, in a rural community or in a small town or in a different country, right? It's just very hard to see all the different perspectives and problems and things that are around you that you might be able to solve with technology. But on the ground level, you are a lot closer to those problems and you have a better opportunity to address the problem with a real solution, like a meaningful solution that just fits. And up until about 5 minutes ago, it never made sense to build software for like 100 people or 1,000 people or even 10,000 people, right? If you were going to build software, you needed to have a certain level of scale for it to make sense. You needed X amount of revenue. You needed a certain size of a market for it to even like matter whether or not you were going to spend your time building this thing, because software was very expensive to build. It was very difficult to like unseat incumbents. It was very difficult to gain a new audience. But what we're seeing now with vibe coding and with some of these tools is that like you can spin something up in a weekend, right? You could spin something up in a couple days, in a week, in a few months that might have never been built because it was too expensive to build. It would have cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, or maybe you didn't know the developers, or whatever million reasons might come up that even just the process of translating this unique thought that you have in your head to have somebody try to develop it, that's a crazy thing. If you've ever built software and tried to get an idea out of your head into somebody else's head and they're supposed to build it, it never comes back like anything you were expecting, right? It's very difficult to make that translation process. But now you can go and get lost in the vibes and the code and tinker. And again, maybe you don't build scalable software. Maybe you don't have the answer. Maybe you're not going to become ABC7 overnight, or Fox, or the New York Times, or the Wall Street Journal. But you might become the next Huffington Post, right? You might become the next contributor to one of these blogs that allows you to break out. And this little small thing that you're tinkering with could open all sorts of doors that were closed to you before, because now you can execute a vision and deliver it visually in a way that you just couldn't through your Figma design or through your Webflow site that's mocked up to look like a web app, but it's not really because it's using Zapier and whatever on the back end. So I think we're in this era where, again, like it's being dismissed, it's being mocked, like people are not taking it super serious, but it is the beginning of something like more. And if you think about it, it's really a continuation of this whole no code movement. You have to go all the way back to 2015, 16, 17 in the early no code in the early no code days to see that this vibe code is really just a shift. It's an evolution of that term. It's people who have ideas, are creators, are builders, are designers, are tinkerers on the web, and they have for so long been limited by code, by the ability to write code. And it's not just writing code, because they say learn code, but learning code is not just learning code. You have to learn this language in the front end and the back end and the database and all this other shit, right? And so these no code tools started springing up to make it easier to abstract those processes, to like bake the cake a little bit for you, and you just do what makes it unique or what fits your specific process. And this vibe code is just a continuation of that, an exponential continuation of that, that again allows more people to solve problems at the edges. Oh, the basement blogger is another, like a little analogy. It's like many people are head down right now. I see people talking all the time. They're like, what are you building with Vibe Code? All this thing. I never see anybody using it. All these hundreds of millions of dollars. I never see any products. It's like, yeah, like people started blogging and building WordPress sites for a long time before they broke the surface into a way that they were respected. Like this stuff takes time, right? People are heads down right now building things that you can't even fathom. And just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not real. This is so short-sighted with the market. It's like silly that people do this type of thing. They're like, oh, I see a trend, but like tomorrow the results aren't there. And it's nothing works like that. Like almost nothing works like that. So this is going to take time. It's going to take months of the basement bloggers, the jokingly basement bloggers being down, heads down, building stuff. And then all of a sudden you're going to start seeing these things, be like, oh, where did this come from? And people will talk about how prolific these folks are, but they're heads down right now. This is the moment where people are tinkering and building. And so what does that mean? It means that new powers will rise around software development. It means that communities will start to build their own stack. It means they'll start to build their own infrastructure. Right now, we live in a world where the large tech companies aggregate all of our attention, all of the value of the relationships and the interactions that we have online. That turns into metadata that then becomes ad revenue, that then becomes corporate spyware, blah, blah, blah. The whole internet is built around that. What you're going to start to see, especially as AI starts scraping all the intellectual capital off the top and people start trying to aggregate intelligence, is that communities and people who are doing work together and people who are collaborating are going to want to safeguard some of that and work inside groups where they know that they're not interacting with bots or sharing information in places that are not hyperbolic echo chambers like a lot of social media is turning into. And so I think you're going to start seeing a lot of power be taken back by, again, things that look like what blogging looked like in the early days of media, but for code, for software, for this infrastructure that we use to communicate and interact and transact business. And I think that's a very exciting space. So dismiss it at your own peril. I think vibe coding is a terrible term, but it's what we've chosen. I hated no code before it, and I'll use it because that's what people get and they understand it. But don't dismiss this. This is not just a trivial thing that's happening. This is a step level change in how we build, how we create, and how we consume information in the digital world. And I'm very excited about that. So anyway, those are my thoughts for today. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Bye, everyone.